I had a very hard time separating these like ideals with who I should be, with who I want to be, with who I'm trying to figure out if I want to be.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Beyond the Manuscript. As always, I am your host, Cooper Anderson, and before we get into it, I just want to say that Beyond the Manuscript is now available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. So, if you like what I do here, please, for me, hit that like, subscribe, follow, all of the buttons. It really helps out the channel. Okay. Let's get into it. My guest today is the author of a brand new book called Embracing Your Perfectionist Self. Please welcome my guest today, Miss Vanessa Bush.
Thanks, Cooper. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think you're actually the first guest to actually reach out to me and be like, hey, I can be on your show if you want. I'm like, I am desperate for guests. Please come on the show. That's great. So I did check out your book before you got here, but I always like to ask the author first. Can you please tell us about your book, Embracing Your Perfectionist Self? What is it about? How did it come to be? Tell me the whole story.
Oh gosh, it is quite the story. So this book was really born probably around 15 years ago, where it just started as a series of Word documents that I had on my personal computer late at night, just writing down ideas, thoughts, almost like advice to myself if I could go back and do things over again and be less perfectionistic. I'm a perfectionist through and through, very type A. My Enneagram is 1. If you know what that means, you'll know that is a perfectionist, 100%. And it wasn't until I met Eric Custer, who is the founder of Manuscripts, of this program, this accelerator of creating creators, that it really kind of came to life as an actual book. This idea that I had for years and years, for decades, honestly, was suddenly just became viable. I thought, wow, oh my gosh, he has this program where he takes creators or influencers or people that just have very common but very powerful ideas that they want to born into the world, where there isn't a resource, there isn't a book out there like it, and turns them into actual books, right? That you can actually hold in your hands and publish. And I thought, wow, I thought of my Word documents that I had created. So it was A through Z is sort of the way I structured my chapters. So each chapter is its own theme, if you will. So A is for I talk about ambition. B, I talk about, what's it like being the best? Is that really necessary all the time? C is for control, and so on. So I had a couple of themes I had already written down, but I had not kind of I didn't have the entire chapter series lined out until I talked to Eric and really jumped into this program. So it's really just a satirical guide on, what if I could give advice to myself? What if I could tell that 8-year-old me it's going to be okay? How would I do that? How would I sort of not make fun of it, but poke fun almost at myself and the world and just say it's not that big of a deal.
In your opinion, why do you think as a society we always put so much pressure on ourselves to quote be perfect? Like a lot of the time, even to breaking points.
Yeah.
And what do you think is the best remedy for this?
Gosh, that is such a loaded question, but one I hope I can answer. I mean, to be honest, I don't have all the answers. I don't think any of us all do, but I think it starts with, we, at least in the Western societies, we pride ourselves on that outward appearance, keeping it all together. Anything that's vulnerable or fragile, we want to keep inside. And I'm trying to break us of that mold. I'm trying to
Mhm.
say that I lived my life for the most part up until this point, just like that. And it didn't serve me very well. In fact, it
Mm.
served me pretty poorly. I talk about this in the book where, as a society, especially in the community where I grew up, just outside of Boston, a little west, it was a society of, and it was never outwardly said, but it was always this sentiment, this environment of you have to be the best. An A is fine, but an A plus is better. There's always room for improvement. You always have to keep trying and keep striving and keep pushing yourself to that breaking point, usually. And it wasn't until I got to college where I suddenly found myself questioning a lot of those ideals that, gosh, is this really the best thing for me? Is society right? Or can I challenge that idea? And so that's just where, again, these ideas were sort of born. Like, what if I could change? What if I could kind of go back and have a do-over of saying, no, I don't think this is the best way. So I think Western society has us kind of molded into this environment of you have to be the best, look the best, always do your best. There's no room for mistakes. You have to control every situation. You have to be everything that you should, whatever that looks like. And it wasn't until, like I said, years later where I kind of realized that didn't serve me very well. I developed an eating disorder in college that went on for the better part of like 14 years. And I talk about that a lot in the book. And I probably wouldn't have even felt comfortable even a couple of years ago sharing that with everyone. But it was through this writing process that it was, again, very cathartic for me. It was healing in a way where it's like, it's okay. It's not a fault of me. It doesn't mean that I am worthless. It doesn't mean that I am less likely to be loved or accepted. I'm just human, and that's okay. So I think society really perpetuates those ideals, and I'm really just trying to break those ideals.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned specifically in Western culture, and I think you could even break that down even a little bit more in Western culture because, just from an outside perspective, there appears to be different demographics have a different definition of what perfect looks like, right?
Yes.
This is where you get really, really complicated in like geographical locations, age differentials, socioeconomic backgrounds,
Sure.
religious backgrounds, like all these different kinds of definitions of what it means to be perfect version of blank really, really affects. And when any person seems to stray from that, either that group or demographic or whatever, even in the pursuit of like education or um, just moving to another side of the country for a job, the perfect version of that comes with like a lot of guilt for losing the old perfect
Yeah.
version of that other thing too. Have you
Right.
noticed that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think from my perspective, it was and the my book is not clinical whatsoever in nature. It really is supposed to be like a very like jovial way of approaching this because life is serious enough, quite
Hmm.
honestly. And I felt like there weren't enough resources where I could sort of see the fun and the less serious side of it. But I mean, I'm a female, right? And I grew up in the Northeast where things are very strict. I didn't have a strict religious upbringing or anything like that, but sort of those Catholic undertones
Hmm.
definitely I felt. Again, I'm not a religious person per se, or neither was my family. We weren't necessarily, going to church every day, but it was that Catholic guilt mindset really, really hit me here in the
Hmm.
heart, and I had a very hard time separating these like ideals with who I should be, with who I want to be, with who I'm trying to figure out if I want to be.
Hmm.
And it was sort of that sphere of coming all together and trying to figure out, gosh, what do I want to do with my life? Who am I as a person versus who was I told to be? And do those still make sense? Are they separate? Are they a little bit the same? Are they completely different? It was a little bit of both for me, but yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely certain aspects of perfectionism. No one defines it the same way, I
Hmm.
think. So that's something I bring up in my book as well. I kind of use one definition that I found very resourceful, very helpful in the context of my book. But there's a lot of definitions on it. There's different clinical definitions. There's like personality aspects of it. Is it a disposition, a disorder, a disease? You pick, honestly. I think they kind of all apply, but there's a lot of factors at play here. And while I do say it is mostly Western, again, from my experience, perfectionism exists everywhere.
Yeah.
It certainly does exist across. It's something that, it doesn't care how old you are, what religion you are, what age, what sex, gender, location. It really just exists. Um, from a core human perspective, really everywhere. So I think there's something for everybody in the book.
Oh, well, you mentioned earlier that the books itself is satirical in a lot of ways, and so satire, I think, or just kind of humor in general, for me, is a great way for writers to like have readers let down their guard. If for me, I like to call it like those armor piercing bullets. We're like, okay, because everyone has this initial wall for anything that they're any kind of media that they're consuming, right? Like there's if you go to a play, there's the invisible fourth wall, which is what the audience is looking through. And if you're able to break through that, for me, it gives like permission for the audience to relate and laugh and all the other emotions that come with actually connecting to an audience, which is a really, really big ask for a writer. So for you, what was the hardest part about writing something satirical?
It wasn't hard really at all for me. That's just who I am. I think, as my core nature is to make people feel comfortable. That's how I proceed, just mostly in life, at my work. As a mom, I'm trying to make sure that others, when I first meet them, and goes back to even just as a child, we would have new students coming in from all different kinds of locations, a new student in class. My mission was always to go to that person and introduce myself and make them feel comfortable. And I've never really lost that. And so I think that kind of relates to the satirical aspect of it, because satire and humor and empathy goes so far for so many of us. They're universal emotions. And I want to make sure that when people are reading this, they don't view it as a very clinical, serious resource. I'm not speaking from a higher ground. I'm speaking from the same ground that you are living in, right?
Hmm.
I'm in it with you. And I think just having that mindset when I was writing just made it so much easier. I'm trying to be a little self-deprecating, and I do that by nature, trying to make fun and make light of situations that are tough and hard, because, like I said, I've gone through some serious things in my life that were very difficult, and mostly alone. The eating disorder part, especially, even my direct family wouldn't have found out unless I sort of came forward. And it's lonely. And so I want to make sure this resource and this book is viewed as the opposite of that. I don't want people to feel lonely. I want you to
Hmm.
feel as if I'm sitting right next to you having just a jovial conversation between friends. So it was actually pretty easy for me to write from that perspective.
Cool. So I'm pretty sure you're the first author we've had go all the way through the manuscripts accelerator here. From your perspective, from someone who's actually written a book through it, can you tell us what it was like?
Yeah. So the first time I met Eric, who leads this program, was for my work. I work at People Grove, and we're, a full student life cycle platform, an ed tech company where, we're really trying to drive on higher ed institutional outcomes together, like, enrollment, yield, and student success, and alumni connectedness and community. And when I was at one of our conferences, this was actually not this past summer, but summer of 22, I met Eric. He was one of our keynote speakers. And when he was describing, because he co-wrote a book with our CEO at the time about super mentors, and you don't really need this one Yoda in your life. You need many people that have different things to offer you. And it was sort of through those conversations that he had us as the audience work through what kind of projects are passion projects for you all, because we all have them, whether we know it or not. And whether it's a TV series or a podcast or poems or a book. And for me, that book jumped out. I thought immediately of those Word documents. And so I talked to him a little bit about his program and said, I really think this might be something I have to do. And it was October of last year where we had that conversation. And I, of course, put every excuse out in the book. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old barely, and we just moved homes, and I've got a full-time job. Like, this isn't my full-time thing. Do you support authors that are doing the same thing? He said, absolutely. You'd be very surprised how many people do the same thing. And he asked me a pivotal question. He said, how much time do you really spend consuming content? I'm like, do you want to know the real answer to that
Yeah.
question? Do I dare say the real answer? And embarrassingly, it's a lot. And he just said, that's your time to create. So
Mhm.
instead of consuming content, you're actually creating your own content. And I thought it was such a pivotal moment for me. I realized that, yes, I want to do this. And I am going to keep putting out excuses until I just decide I am worth it. I want to invest in myself. And this is something that's worth being told. And so it was just finding those couple of hours every day or a couple hours a week to just write. And it was very cathartic for me. And then going through the marketing of it was a whirlwind. I learned a lot. Um,
What was speaking of marketing, what
yeah,
was that you found the most helpful in that aspect? Because I think that
yeah,
in the world of publishing, what people don't really understand is that we're currently living in a time where the most people ever are making a living writing. But the hardest part out of that is now
yeah,
launching an author. Like, you know,
yes.
this. So for you, this is your first book. What was that like? Like discovering, okay, how do I find an audience? How do I activate it? How do I reach
Yeah.
them? What were some helpful tips that you learned?
Gosh, I would say, I mean, all the resources, the templates, and our marketing specialists. I have to give a shout out to Michelle Pollock. She was wonderful, very helpful, and it was just working with them to get some of those ideas and to think about, how do I want to utilize my online presence, and how do I build other ones, and think outside of the box, different mediums that I hadn't tried before. But I found a lot of success with LinkedIn. With perfectionism, it wasn't a very niche market, so to speak. I didn't have a set area to go to, like a watering hole, if you will, for perfectionists. We exist everywhere, and
Mm-hmm.
we look very, very different. So it was a little bit hard for me to figure out who to target with that, but they gave me some great ideas. I just kept up with telling my truth. LinkedIn, I found, was very helpful. I'm connected just from my work with a lot of different leaders and individuals across the country and beyond. And and then just doing some research on my own. Who else is doing podcasts or books related to perfectionism that I could reach out to that resonates very much with my message? And so it's connecting with those individuals as well, and just getting a good sense of community and having people behind you means everything. And if you know that someone's mission is to publish their first book, you want to help support that. So that part was easy, but creating the content itself for posts and whatnot was, for me, the most difficult, because it just was one more thing I had to think about that wasn't reactional. I had to think a lot through about those posts, and when, and it's definitely a full-time job. So
Yeah,
I was
definitely.
grateful for the help and resources, but yeah, I probably, if I did this again, I probably would hire someone to do it, or take some vacation from my full-time job to
Mm-hmm.
do it, because it definitely was a lot. The marketing was harder than the writing for me.
Mm, gotcha. And the last little step about creating the book itself, as a self-proclaimed perfectionist, what was it like being able to like let go and be like, okay, I'm not going to make any more changes to this manuscript, to this cover. I'm just going to send it off to the printers, and I just have to
Yeah,
wait now for like 3 to 4 months while it's being created,
yeah,
and then you wait just for your big box of books to show up at your house. What was that like?
yeah. Uh, a whirlwind. I had sort of a pendulum of emotions at times. I was like, okay, it's done. There's nothing else I can do. Letting go of the control issues that I have and saying, these are experts. I'm sure it's going to look great. I've already looked through it a bunch of times. It is enough. Big central tenet message of my book. But then I, of course, have moments where, gosh, did I read through this enough times? Did I catch all of the grammatical
Mm,
errors? Does it read exactly the way that I had intended it? Is this font really the right choice? Like, is this cover choice? That is a big one. Is this cover really the right one? And I'll be honest, the cover, when I first saw it, I was like, well, I don't know. I think I might want to go with like another option. They gave me a couple, and I was sort of gravitating towards another one because it just looked more me, more of my style. But I had to think a little bit outside again of that comfort zone. Like, what's going to jump out at someone when they see it on a shelf versus something that just looks comfortable? What does the majority of people want? And how do I take that into consideration with general marketing principles about, again, displaying books on a bookshelf or what you see online? Um, but eventually, I kind of just went with it and said, they've done this before. They produce so many talented individuals and their books and their first novels that I'm just going to go with it. So, and I never look back. So I'm really happy with it. And I'm excited and proud that it looks the way that it does and it sounds and reads the way it does. And I have gotten nothing but amazing feedback back from all sorts of readers and folks. So yeah.
Very cool. At the moment, do you have any plans to write another book?
I don't right now. That's not to say that I won't ever. But especially because this book was so long in the making, um, I feel that I've sort of given as much as I can at this point.
Hmm.
There are definitely certain aspects or certain chapters within the book where I feel like some of these themes I could absolutely expand on. And so maybe it's something diving deeper into that. But right now, nothing jumps out at me as I have to write a second book or I have another idea brewing. I know so many of my cohort members do, and I applaud them and I can't wait to cheer them on. For me, it's again, this first one, good is good enough. I'm good with this first one for now. If something else, if there's that fire that burns within me that says I have another message that I absolutely need to get out, then I'll think about it. But right now, I am good with being good enough. My
Sure.
first is good.
I love it. Great. All right. Well, Vanessa, we're running a little bit out of time here. So my next question is, where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, really, Barnes and Noble, Target, Amazon, of course, is the usual suspect. Yeah, but they can certainly reach any of those mediums, and it is available for order.
Very cool. And what about any social media handles you want to promote?
Yeah, so I'm definitely very active on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram are the three that I check the most. I will say I tried TikTok, and as an elder millennial, I just couldn't do it. So
Mhm.
I think I have a profile on there still, but I probably should delete it. Same thing with Twitter or X.
Mhm.
I don't really go on those, but those three, LinkedIn is probably the most active profile that I have. And that's just LinkedIn.com/, Vanessa, what is it? Vanessa Bush, MED, my
Mhm.
master's in education that I got. So that's what that refers to. Not a doctor.
All right, great. Well, one more time, guys, I want to thank my guest today, Vanessa Bush, for coming onto the show. Beyond the Manuscripts, of course, is powered by Manuscripts, where you never write alone. Vanessa, thank you one more time for coming to the show. Yeah, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Cooper, and kudos to this program. It was amazing.